There is a city in Eastern Europe that, on one ordinary night in 1986, was home to nearly 50,000 people, and that today sits almost exactly as it was left. Apartment blocks standing empty, an amusement park that never opened frozen mid-construction, and forests slowly swallowing streets no human has driven down in decades. This is the real story of Chernobyl and the city built to serve it, Pripyat, a story of Soviet ambition, a catastrophic mistake, an extraordinary evacuation, and nearly 40 years of nature reclaiming a place humans were forced to abandon almost overnight. Before we continue, if you enjoy this kind of content, give the video a like and subscribe, with the bell turned on so you never miss any of the journeys we have planned for you. To understand what happened at Chernobyl, we first have to understand why it was built there at all. In the 1970s, the Soviet Union was rapidly expanding its nuclear power program, viewing atomic energy as a source of national pride and a symbol of technological superiority over the West. The Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, located in what is now northern Ukraine, roughly 60 miles north of Kiev, was one of several massive facilities built to power the growing Soviet grid, eventually housing 4 operational reactors, with 2 more under construction. To house the tens of thousands of workers, engineers, and their families needed to run and support such an enormous facility, the Soviet government built an entirely new city from scratch, just 2 miles from the plant, named Pripyat, after the river running alongside it. Pripyat was, by Soviet standards, considered something close to a model city. It was designed and built specifically for the young, highly educated families of nuclear plant workers, and it showed. Wide tree-lined boulevards, modern apartment buildings, well-stocked shops that often had access to goods scarce elsewhere in the Soviet Union, 16 kindergartens, 5 schools, a hospital, a cultural palace with a swimming pool, and a brand new amusement park scheduled to open just days after the disaster that would ultimately empty the city forever. The average age of Pripyat's roughly 49,000 residents was reportedly under 26 years old, making it one of the youngest cities in the entire Soviet Union, a genuine showcase of what Soviet nuclear science could build for its most valued workers. The reactors themselves were of a Soviet design known as RBMK, a type of reactor that, unlike most Western nuclear designs of the era, had a specific and dangerous flaw. Under certain conditions, particularly at low power levels, the reactor could become unstable in a way that made it more likely to increase power suddenly rather than naturally shut itself down, the opposite of the built-in safety behavior most Western reactor designs were engineered to have. This design flaw was known internally to some Soviet nuclear scientists and engineers, but it wasn't something openly discussed or well understood by the plant operators actually running the reactors day to day, a gap between what a small circle of specialists knew and what frontline staff had been trained to expect that would prove catastrophic. On the night of April 25th into April 26, 1986, plant operators at Chernobyl's reactor number 4 were conducting a safety test, one designed, ironically, to check whether the plant's turbines could continue supplying enough power to run emergency cooling systems for a short period during a power failure, before backup diesel generators could fully kick in. To carry out this test, operators had to deliberately reduce the reactor's power output significantly, a delicate process that pushed the reactor into precisely the unstable, low-power state where its design flaw became most dangerous. A combination of procedural errors, the reactor's inherent design instability, and a series of manual control decisions made under time pressure late at night caused the reactor's power output to spike far beyond safe levels within a matter of seconds. The result was catastrophic. A massive steam explosion, followed almost immediately by a second explosion, likely involving hydrogen gas, blew the reactor's 1,000-ton steel and concrete lid clean off, tore open the reactor building and exposed the reactor's core directly to the open air. Unlike a nuclear bomb, this wasn't a nuclear detonation, but the explosion and subsequent fire released enormous quantities of radioactive material directly into the atmosphere, material that would eventually spread across a significant portion of Europe, detected as far away as Sweden and the United Kingdom within days. In the immediate aftermath, plant firefighters and staff rushed toward the burning reactor building with almost no understanding of the true scale of radiation they were being exposed to. Many were told simply that there had been a fire, not that they were fighting a fire actively releasing lethal doses of radiation into the surrounding air. Several of these first responders would die from acute radiation sickness within weeks, and many more would suffer serious long-term health consequences. For a deeply unsettling amount of time immediately following the disaster, Soviet authorities delayed publicly acknowledging the severity of what had happened, and remarkably, the nearby city of Pripyat continued largely with life as usual. For more than a full day after the explosion, residents went about ordinary Saturday routines. Children played outside, and some Pripyat residents reportedly watched the distant glow and smoke from the burning reactor from their own balconies, unaware they were witnessing one of the worst nuclear accidents in history unfold in real time, and unknowingly absorbing radiation exposure with every passing hour. It wasn't until roughly 36 hours after the explosion that Soviet authorities ordered the full evacuation of Pripyat. Residents were told officially that the evacuation would be temporary, lasting perhaps 3 days, and were instructed to bring only essential documents and a small amount of personal belongings, leaving behind furniture, family photographs, pets, and in many cases, food still sitting on kitchen tables. Over 1,000 buses were mobilized to move the entire population of nearly 50,000 people out of the city within just a few hours, one of the largest and fastest mass evacuations in modern history up to that point. Those residents, of course, would never be allowed to return home permanently. What was framed as a temporary precaution became a permanent exile, and the abandoned apartments, schools, and shops of Pripyat have remained essentially frozen at that exact moment ever since. In the weeks and months following the disaster, Soviet authorities established what became known as the Exclusion Zone, an area extending roughly 18 miles in every direction from the plant, encompassing not just Pripyat, but dozens of smaller villages and farms, all evacuated and, in many cases, later bulldozed entirely and buried due to severe contamination. The total number of people eventually relocated from across the wider contaminated region, beyond just Pripyat itself, is estimated at well over 100,000 people, an enormous, largely permanent displacement that reshaped an entire region of what was then still the Soviet Union. The immediate cleanup and containment effort, which came to be known by the Russian word for liquidation, involved hundreds of thousands of workers over the following years: soldiers, miners, engineers, and firefighters, many of whom worked in extremely hazardous radiation conditions for only brief shifts at a time to limit individual exposure. These liquidators built what became known as the sarcophagus, a hastily constructed concrete and steel structure erected over the ruined reactor within months of the disaster, designed to contain the worst of the remaining radioactive material inside the damaged reactor building. The sarcophagus was always intended as a temporary emergency measure rather than a permanent solution, and by the early 2000s, engineers had grown increasingly concerned about its structural integrity as the original hastily built structure began to deteriorate. This concern eventually led to one of the largest and most ambitious civil engineering projects of the 21st century, the construction of the new Safe Confinement, an enormous arch-shaped steel structure large enough to fully enclose both the original reactor building and the aging sarcophagus underneath it. Due to the extreme radiation levels still present at the site, the structure couldn't simply be built in place. Instead, engineers constructed the entire arch, roughly the height of a 30-story building and wide enough to cover multiple football fields, on rails a safe distance away. And in 2016, slid the finished, fully assembled structure over the reactor site in a massive engineering operation, one of the largest movable land structures ever built by human hands. The new Safe Confinement is designed to contain the site securely for at least the next 100 years, buying time for the far slower, more delicate work of eventually dismantling what remains of the reactor itself. While the immediate human toll and cleanup dominated the story for years, one of the most fascinating and unexpected chapters of Chernobyl's history has unfolded gradually over the decades since. What happened to the natural environment once humans were forced to leave? With no permanent human population remaining within the exclusion zone, and with certain kinds of human activity like farming, construction, and hunting effectively eliminated across a vast area, wildlife populations in the zone have, in many respects, flourished. Wolves, wild boar, elk, and European bison now roam through areas once occupied by farms and villages. Forests have reclaimed roads and building foundations, and researchers have documented populations of certain species that are notably larger than in comparable, non-contaminated areas nearby. A genuinely surprising and still actively studied ecological phenomenon that scientists sometimes describe as an unintentional, if deeply imperfect, wildlife sanctuary. This doesn't mean radiation has no ongoing effects on the local ecosystem. Researchers continue to study measurable biological impacts on certain species within the most contaminated pockets of the zone. And the science remains genuinely complex and, in some areas, actively debated. But the broad, visually striking reality of a landscape essentially returning to wilderness, with trees growing through the floors of abandoned buildings and forests overtaking what were once residential streets, has become one of the most iconic and recognizable images associated with Chernobyl today. A stark visual reminder of how quickly nature can reclaim space once human presence is removed. Remarkably, a small number of residents, mostly elderly people from villages within the zone, quietly returned to their original homes in the months and years following the evacuation, defying official prohibitions simply because they preferred to live out their remaining years on their own land rather than in unfamiliar resettlement housing elsewhere. Ukrainian authorities largely tolerated this small, aging population of so-called self-settlers over the following decades. And while their numbers have steadily dwindled through natural attrition, a handful continued living within the zone for years, growing their own food and largely ignoring the radiation warnings that kept virtually everyone else away. Pripyat itself, meanwhile, became something almost impossible to categorize, a fully intact modern city, frozen at the exact moment of its abandonment, slowly being consumed by the forest growing up around and through it. The city's amusement park, which was scheduled to open to the public for the first time just days after the disaster, never got the chance. Its iconic yellow Ferris wheel, now rusted, remains one of the most photographed and recognizable images associated with the entire disaster, an eerie symbol of a celebration that was cut short before it ever began. Apartment buildings still contain furniture, books, and personal belongings left behind in the rushed evacuation, though decades of exposure to weather, looters, and a steadily growing tourism industry have significantly altered and, in many cases, damaged or removed much of what was originally left behind. Beginning in the mid-2000s and expanding significantly over the following 2 decades, the Ukrainian government began permitting limited, carefully controlled tourism into portions of the exclusion zone, including Pripyat itself, drawing visitors from around the world curious to see the site firsthand. Guided tours, operating under strict radiation monitoring and safety protocols, walk visitors through specific approved areas, and interest in visiting the zone increased dramatically, following the release of an internationally popular television dramatization of the disaster in 2019, which introduced the story to a massive new global audience, largely unfamiliar with the details of what had actually happened decades earlier. That growing tourism industry, along with the broader story of Chernobyl itself, took an unexpected and deeply concerning turn in February 2022, when Russian military forces invading Ukraine seized control of the Chernobyl site and the surrounding exclusion zone during the opening days of the full-scale invasion, using it as a staging and transit area due to its location near the border with Belarus. Ukrainian plant staff were reportedly held at the site for an extended period under Russian control, unable to rotate out for normal shift changes, raising serious international concern about both the physical safety of the aging facility and the well-being of the workers still required to maintain and monitor it, even amid active military occupation. Russian forces withdrew from the site roughly 5 weeks later, and while no radiation release occurred during the occupation, the episode served as an unsettling reminder that a decommissioned disaster site from decades earlier could still become entangled in entirely new, unrelated geopolitical conflict. Today, nearly 40 years after the disaster, the human cost of Chernobyl remains a subject of genuine scientific and historical debate, with estimates of eventual deaths attributable to the accident, including long-term cancer cases developed over subsequent decades, varying considerably between different scientific and governmental bodies, ranging from the low thousands to considerably higher figures depending on the methodology and assumptions used. What isn't disputed is the sheer scale of the response required. The permanent displacement of well over 100,000 people, the ongoing engineering effort required to secure the site for the coming century, and the fact that certain areas closest to the original reactor will likely remain unsafe for permanent human habitation for tens of thousands of years to come. A timescale that stretches almost incomprehensibly beyond any single human lifetime, or even the lifespan of most human civilizations recorded in history. And yet, Chernobyl and Pripyat have also become something genuinely unique in the modern world. Living case studies for scientists studying everything from wildlife ecology in the total or near-total absence of humans, to the long-term structural behavior of abandoned buildings, to the psychology and sociology of the small number of people who chose to return despite official warnings. Very few places on Earth offer researchers of nearly any discipline quite this specific and unusual a natural experiment, an entire modern city and the landscape surrounding it, essentially paused in a single moment, left to be reclaimed, studied, and slowly reinterpreted by each new generation that encounters its story. And so we reach the end of this journey through Chernobyl and Pripyat, a Soviet showcase city turned into one of the most haunting and studied places on the entire planet within the span of a single night. A story of a dangerous design flaw, a delayed warning, an evacuation meant to last 3 days that became permanent, and nearly 4 decades of forests and wildlife quietly reclaiming streets once filled with nearly 50,000 people going about ordinary lives. If you made it this far, you now know the real story behind Chernobyl, far better than the vast majority of people who only know it as a headline or a television series. If you enjoyed this video, leave us a like, subscribe with the bell turned on, and tell us in the comments what surprised you the most about this entire story. See you on the next journey.